Thank you for the invite to come along and speak today. Now I've got the very difficult job of keeping you all awake after that very nice lunch that we had, so I hope we managed to last for 15 or 20 minutes. Yes, I'm based up in Aberdeen at James Hutton Institute, which does research into various aspects of land use and governance and climate change, soils and water, so it's an interdisciplinary institute. And I work in the social, economic and geographical sciences group, so along with other psychologists and sociologists, geographers, so we're a mixed group and we work on a lot of different projects. This was a project that I undertook in 2013 with colleagues at the University of the West of England and the University of Southampton. So I was the only one from James Hutton Institute that was on this project. So it was rather lonely being stuck in Aberdeen when everybody else was in Bristol and Southampton. But anyhow, we managed. So I'll tell you a little bit about our Foodscapes project. I must say I was very jealous of Mike this morning with his Fife diet when he said it was a project that lasted 7 or 8 years, because this is like micro Fife diet because it lasted 7 or 8 months. So I would love to have got my teeth into this a bit more and done it a bit longer, but it was a very short ESRC, AHRC project. And we were looking to try and use art and creativity to engage with people's interactions with food and with the landscape. And through this, we wanted to find out how sort of elusive concepts like sustainability, well-being, community, and those sorts of things, how people make sense of them, how they become more meaningful in daily practice. So what we were trying to do then was politicise these kind of ideas and concepts that can often seem very vague, but relate them to people's buying choices and their habits and their routines and their practices, and especially around cooking and eating food. So food was very much the focus for this exchange. And like I made the point this morning, this extended from growing food right the way through to preparing it, thinking about the ways people access it, how they share food, all the different aspects that go into turning what comes out of the ground to how it ends up in our kitchens and on our plates. So in a nutshell, what we were trying to do was to have some really important conversations around food. I've mentioned 2013, the partners. So as well as the 2 academic partners, UWE and Southampton, we were also working with community groups in Bristol, one of which was a food bank charity, and the other one was a local food growing project. And there was also, the artists in Bristol as well. So altogether, you've got 6 different partners on this quite small project. So there was a lot of to-ing and fro-ing and conversations and getting to know each other. But it was really exciting. So how did we have these appetising conversations with people? Well, we were looking at people that were in food insecurity. And around this, we had a series of group meetings and focus group workshops. And we were accessing people in food security, mainly through the food bank and also through the edible growing movement, who were already trying to do things around food other than just have food as a handout. So they're already trying to encourage people to grow food and to think about ways of cooking and preparing food differently. So on top of this, we had the interviews and focus groups. We also volunteered at the food bank and at the supermarket where they were collecting the food for the food bank to just gain an insight into the sorts of practices that were happening, to speak to the people that are accessing these services, and to just get an idea of the sort of conversations that are going on. So it was a very qualitative practice, very qualitative project. With staff and volunteers across a wide range of different organisations. and encompassing a lot of different practices around food growing and food preparation. So we're having these important conversations around different food practices, and food, as I'm sure you'll agree, provides a wonderful catalyst to start having conversations, because it's something, like I think you said this morning, it's at the kind of root of everything that we do. It's essential to what's happening, and it's incredibly easy to start having conversations about, oh, how do you do that? Oh, we do it this way, and oh no, we never eat that sort of thing, or we eat it in the morning, oh no, we eat it in the evening. So, it's a very easy trigger to get into conversations, and that shed light on practices that relate to sustainability and people's ideas about what is sustainable, what is nourishing, and also to think about ideas around justice. So how people are accessing food, what are their attitudes to feeding their families, and community. Food can also be a very social event, not only in the sharing of food, but in the preparation and in the growing of food as well. And as I say, this was with people that were suffering from food insecurity. So what we're attempting to do through all this is to understand food as a related set of practices, rather than just an end product, rather as something that you buy ready-made off the shelf and take it home, but as something that incorporates a whole set of practices around accessing, around preparation, around buying, whether you buy food or growing it. And with each of those practices are a whole load of assumptions and beliefs and values and ideas about sustainability, about nutrition, that sort of thing. So we ended up with a lot of data about what people think about food and ideas about that. And then thinking about how we can address food insecurity and unsustainability with certain groups of the population. Food, the concept of food deserts was one that came up. And I think somebody this morning mentioned the starved and the stuffed. So here's Bristol, a big city in an affluent Western country, and yet within that you've got pockets of people that don't have access to this food. So the food poverty problem has moved not from being a them and us when the them are some distance away, but a them and us when the them are around the corner. And living in the same cities as us. So yes, all the time we're thinking about food insecurity and injustice. Right, as well as the qualitative methods that I've just described, we also had a particular event. So this is where the art and the creativity comes in. So in Bristol we had a 10-day interactive and performative exhibition, which was part of Big Green Week in Bristol in 2013, and we just had a shop space, a pop-up space in the middle of the city centre. Anybody could go in as they were going along. It was part of the festival, and it was open. There were some people invited, but it was open to anybody that could come along, and just sort of took their interest. We co-designed it with different artists. And with the food growers and the food bank people to be as appealing as possible. And it was a place where art and creativity were integral to the activity of what we were doing. And again, it was activities around food. So people could come in and participate in what was happening. So we baked bread, we plucked pheasants, and we had this exchange of experiences around different food items. So it wasn't instructive. We weren't saying to people, this is what you should eat and this is how you should eat it and this is what you should do. It was a mixture of lots of different things that were happening, lots of different sensations and experiences and smells and weights and time and feelings and textures and materialities, all about different kinds of food and turning crops and poultry into food. So within this particular art space, there was a whole load of things that were juxtapositioned within food-related practices and materials. And it not only helped to bring people together, but it also gave a sense of timing about how long it takes to bake bread, and how long it takes to prepare food, and the smell of the tomato plants and things like that. There was a wall of vegetables, fresh vegetables, that a sensory wall that people could go up and touch. And so we're trying to look at food in a different way, not only as something that you eat, but as something that can be visually appealing, or something, if you're presented with a pheasant, you might actually recoil away a little bit, think, oh, I'm not going to pluck that before I eat it, and yet you're quite happy to take something off the shelf. So it was trying to summon up and get a whole range of different reactions and experiences to the ordinary. So it's upsetting, it's disrupting the normal responses that we might have to food, and in this way it's encouraging people from different backgrounds to come together in a space that's not familiar to them, and to have these different experiences together and to share them, and to upset the normal, everyday, taken for granted kind of routines that people might have around their food practices. And it also disrupted the art, science, everyday positioning, because a wall of food, do you know if that's an art exhibition, or is it something that I can take a bit out of and then put in the pot and cook it? So it's trying to create different meanings around upsetting and disrupting things, and encouraging people to engage with an art, not really an exhibition, an art experience, in a way that they probably wouldn't if they were in a more conventional gallery sort of setting. So it's very much an experiential, an embodied sensory kind of exhibition. Right, moving on to the key outcomes. So we thought that one of the key outcomes of this project was that because participants were being invited to respond not as ethical consumers, so they weren't being expected to buy anything, or they weren't being asked to follow labels or anything like that, but we were trying to encourage them to think about and to enact their ecological citizenship. So there wasn't information about organic produce or improved produce or healthy supply chains or anything like that. It wasn't about how to food shop, or what you should have in your basket, or what nutritionally makes up a safe and healthy diet. It was really just about getting people to experience different food sensations. So we weren't looking at the ethical consumer. We weren't trying to, because obviously a lot of these people were in food insecurity, and telling them that you have to buy this kind of food and that kind of food just wouldn't have made sense because their food choices were so limited. So it was about trying to encourage them to experience food differently, and to attend to those experiences, and then to take that back into their everyday life, rather than to give them a whole set of instructions about what is deemed healthy or nutritious. It was also a set of performative engagements around different materials, around the diverse project partners that were included. So it was experiences of volunteering at a food bank, it was experiences of growing food and going out into the wind and the rain and helping the farmers of an urban farm to grow this food. And also in the exhibition space, as I said, there was the kneading of bread, and then afterwards, people that were still there were invited to come and share the food and sit down and to enjoy the experience of the different tastes and the things that they created. So I think we mentioned this morning soup making as an essential skill. Things like that, taking the time to prepare this food together and then to share it afterwards. So we're bringing in an awareness of time and how long it takes to do these things. And lastly, yes, the exhibition space was temporary. It was only 10 days long. So we had a very limited time. It was a very short intervention to get people to engage with these practices and to challenge their assumptions. We would like to go on and to do a longer project and to try and think about how could we, because that was obviously very intense, could that be sustained in some way over a longer period of time? I would like to speak to Mike more about running a 7 or 8 year project and how to keep that kind of enthusiasm going and that sort of thing, and to look at approaches about. Cesar this morning was talking about marketing and the consumer, but to look at challenging consuming practices around food and how people can be more engaged in thinking about where their food comes from and how to get involved in that side of it. As an artistic intervention. So in summary then, we were trying to challenge different food cultures. Obviously Bristol is a multicultural city, there's lots of different ideas and beliefs and diets and around different kinds of food. And we challenged these different assumptions and food cultures, particularly around insecurity and unsustainability, through this idea of creative exchange and creative experience. So we're doing research, but at the same time we're trying to be creative. And one example of this was that we just went through Bristol during the Big Green Week and we were asking, what did you eat today? And people are giving us, I ate cheese and I ate bread and I ate yoghurt and cereals and chips and all sorts of things. And we then put these into a word cloud for each day just to see what people were eating. So trying to be creative in the way that we assessed the research and having that built into the exchange that we were having with people rather than a sit-down interview and that. We're just dipping in and then using this the next day to say, this is what people ate yesterday, what did you eat today? Using it as a sort of creative tool to engage people around food practices. Ethnographic field work, again, was challenging with the food charity and the food growers, but I think it's really important and instructive that it enabled us to gain an experience of the things that are happening. Again, rather than doing some kind of interview or survey, we're engaging and we're actually going out and doing something and volunteering at the food bank to gain a glimpse of what it means to people to be in food insecurity. And then the multiple forms of engagement that I talked about was a novel form of engagement with the different participants' lifestyles, actually. And we, through these forms of engagement, we encourage people to reflect on the presentation of food and the role that food played within their lifestyles. Probably something that doesn't, unless you're researching in this area, you don't generally think about it too much. But to get people to think about what they ate and why they ate in that way and what practices were associated with their food lifestyles. And also there was, friendships formed during this project around the arts practice and the intervention that we did. And in the wider city of Bristol as well, through the intervention in Big Green Week, people dipped in and were able to see what we were doing and create interest in even if it's just for an hour or so, and there's no way to follow that up afterwards, but some people were followed up, and we know that they referred back to this event as something that was pivotal to changing the way they thought about and accessed food. So very quick conclusion. So including these embodied food experiences into food assistance programs, such as those that being provided by food banks, rather than just seeing food as a handout at the end of the day, can encourage changes in food relations that can otherwise be neglected, and that food remains just a product that is picked off the shelf and not something that we engage with in a deeper way. And all the time trying to say that food is more than a commodity at the end of the line. It's a series of knowledges and practices and experiences and understandings and cultures and tastes and habits and routines around food and what's available that we learn over a lifetime. So changing these practices can empower people to learn new skills and to think about their relationship to food and food cultures, and like Mike said this morning, linking food more closely to place. And food is so much more than what we eat. And we were seeking to explore the role for food beyond nutrition and in a much wider cultural sense. I think I'm going to end there.